I pulled the Apache girl from the river, thinking I was just saving a life. But for 17 days now, she hasn't left me alone. Every morning she stands 30 feet from my cabin, still as stone, watching. She doesn't speak, doesn't move, just waits. A normal person might have said thank you, maybe brought a gift, then gone on their way. But Ayana isn't like most. She follows me to the market 30 feet behind. She follows me to the river, same distance. Even when I visit neighbors, she keeps that rope of space between us, never closer, never farther. Yesterday I tried to walk toward her. Soon as I stepped forward, she stepped back. No matter what I did, she held that line. Always 30 feet, always those dark eyes on me like she knows something I don't. Mrs. Patterson at the store saw us and made the sign of the cross. "That Apache girl," she whispered. "She ain't following you, Boon, she's guarding something." But guarding what? And why 30 feet, not 20, not 40? The first night, I found a feather on my doorstep. The next morning, 2. By sundown, 3. And today the 4th appeared on my fence rail, black-tipped and perfect. I never heard a step, never saw a hand place it there. Yet when I looked up, Ayana was watching. For the first time she moved, tilted her head, then raised a hand and pointed to the river. The same river where I'd pulled her from the current, where I thought her story ended. "You want me to go there?" I called. She didn't answer, didn't lower her hand. The wind picked up, cottonwoods shivering, pine scent in the air. A hawk cried overhead. I tucked the feather in my shirt and started down the path. Behind me I heard the faint tread of moccasins keeping that same careful distance. The river was swollen from the rains, running faster than before. On the bank, someone had stacked smooth stones in a spiral, leading straight into the deep water. I'd never seen such a thing. I turned to ask if she had done it, but Ayana was gone. She stood at the edge of the stone spiral, bare feet pressed against the first smooth rock. For the first time since she began shadowing me, she'd broken the rule of distance. No 30 feet, no invisible rope keeping her back. Just her and that circle of stones. She knelt, palm resting flat on the largest rock at the center, and when her dark eyes lifted to mine, I heard her voice for the first time in 17 days. "You saved the wrong person." The words struck colder than river water. Wrong person. I'd pulled her from certain death. There was no mistake about that. Her lips had been blue, her body limp, until I forced the water out of her lungs. She had breathed because of me. "I don't understand," I said, moving toward her. She rose quick, retreating until the gap was restored, 30 feet again, as if it had never been broken. But her gaze stayed locked on mine, and in those eyes I saw something worse than suspicion. I saw fear, not of me, but of something older, tied to those feathers, tied to this spiral, tied to whatever had lived in that river long before either of us. "Wrong person," she whispered again. "Now the debt follows you." "What debt?" I demanded, but she turned and slipped into the tall grass, vanishing like smoke. I stood staring at the stones, my chest tight. They weren't random. Each rock was chosen, smooth river stones set with care, leading in a slow spiral toward the deep current, the same place I dragged her out that morning of the flood. The pattern pulled my eyes as if it wanted me to step in, to finish something I didn't understand. That afternoon I rode into town, feathers heavy in my pocket like anchors. The general store was full of its usual chatter, but the moment I walked in, the room went quiet. Mrs. Patterson looked up from her ledger, her brow knotted. "That Apache girl still following you, Boon?" "She keeps her distance," I answered, though I didn't know why I bothered defending her. "Distance or not," she said softly, "folks are starting to talk." Old Henrik Larsson spat into the brass spittoon. "Apaches don't do nothing without reason. Girls marking you for something." "Marking me?" I asked. Mrs. Patterson leaned closer, her voice hushed. "My late wife's cousin married a man near their land, told stories, said if you save an Apache life, you don't just walk away free. You become bound, responsible for every debt that life carries, every obligation, every enemy that comes with it." The word sat heavy. Enemy. "That don't make sense," I said. Henrik shook his head. "Makes all the sense in the world. You meddle with a man's fate, you become part of it. That's the way of things." I bought my supplies in silence, thoughts running wild. When I stepped outside, there she was again, 30 feet away, standing by my horse, watching. I loaded the saddlebags, and as I swung into the saddle, she finally spoke. "You ask wrong questions, then tell me the right ones," I said. She only shook her head, slow and certain. You cannot ask. You must see. See what? I asked. But she was already moving, not toward the river this time, but toward the old mining trail in the foothills. The trail nobody used anymore. The one lined with empty shacks and rotted claims where men once dreamed of striking it rich. I should have gone home. Should have mended the fence line, checked the cattle, put my hands to work like any rancher ought. But my boots carried me forward, following her path through the dusk. By the time I reached the first cabin, the sun was bleeding behind the ridgeline. Ayana stood beside the leaning doorway, closer now than she'd ever been. The 30 feet were gone. The rule had been broken twice in a single day, and that, more than anything, told me the night ahead would not be like the ones before. She stood so near I could see the beadwork on her dress, the silver bracelet at her wrist, and how the fading sun caught in her dark hair. For the first time, she wasn't 30 feet away. Here, she said, pointing at the cabin door. I dismounted and stepped closer. Scratched into the old wood was a name, Maria Santos, 1847. Beneath it, newer marks, fresh cuts that hadn't weathered with age. They read, "She was supposed to drown." The letters felt raw beneath my fingertips, carved by a hand that knew the story. Someone had been here, and recently. Who was she? I asked. Ayana had already slipped back to her familiar distance. The closeness was gone. She didn't answer at once. Instead, she moved to the ruined well beside the cabin and gestured. Its cover had long since rotted, leaving a ring of stone and a hollow dark mouth below. Maria Santos lived here, she said, her voice steady in the stillness. Mexican woman married to a prospector named James. She had a baby. Ayana paused, looking into the well. The child died. Fever. Winter was cruel. I could picture it. Lonely hills, a woman grieving while her husband worked claims that would never pay. What happened to her? She walked into the river, wanted to join her child, but the water was shallow, not strong enough to finish it. She lived. My chest tightened. Someone was supposed to let the river spirits take her. That was the agreement. Ayana's eyes lifted to mine. But a white man found her. Pulled her out. Changed everything. A chill slid through me. Who? Your grandfather. The name landed like a hammer. Ezra Delaney. The man who built the ranch I ran now. He never spoke much of those early days, but I remembered whispers my father passed down, how Ezra found a half-dead woman on the riverbank, brought her back, gave her work. She stayed, Ayana said. For 23 years, cooked, cleaned, cared for cattle, never spoke of the river. But the debt clung to him until the day he died. Then to your father. Now to you. That's impossible, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. He did good. He saved her life. He changed fate, she answered. That makes him responsible for all that followed. She began walking slow circles around the well. Maria Santos bore 3 more children. All lived because she lived. One of those children was my grandmother. My mouth went dry. You're her great-granddaughter. Ayana nodded. Maria should have died that day. None of us should exist. But we do because Ezra Delaney interfered. When you saved me, you strengthened the debt. Now you carry it for all my line. That is why I follow. Not grateful, bound. The words weighed heavier than the feathers in my pocket. Then I heard it. Horses on the trail, moving quick. Voices rising with them. Ayana moved closer than ever before, breaking her own rule again. They come for you, she said urgently. Town people. They think I am curse. Torches flickered through the trees. Angry shouts carried up the trail. Someone yelled my name. Someone else yelled hers. The word witch cut through the night like a knife. We need to leave, I said, reaching for her hand. She pulled back. Cannot touch. Binding grows stronger. Then stay 30 feet behind me, I whispered, and run. We slipped into the forest. It was the strangest chase I'd ever known. Me leading, her trailing, always that rope of distance. The mob's voices grew louder. Henrik Larsson's shout clear above them all. Delaney, you bring that witch down here right now. I knew these hills better than any of them, the deer paths, the hidden gullies. But Ayana knew them differently. She moved like shadow, leaving the night undisturbed. We reached a rocky outcrop the valley spread below. My ranch house glowed warm in the dark, lamplight spilling from its windows. So close, but the slope down was too open, too exposed. I kept my voice low. Why do they call you a witch? She stood behind me, her voice carrying just enough to reach my ears. I know things. Healing plants, signs in the weather, where water runs pure. White folk fear what they do not understand. Patterson's words echoed in my head. You were guarding something. Ayana's voice was calm. I guard you from making debt worse. Every day you do not understand, you risk more. Today you touch the well where Maria Santos drew water. Touch the door where she carved her name. You made the connection stronger. I turned toward her, careful not to cross that invisible line. In the moonlight she looked younger, less like the silent shadow that had followed me for weeks, more like a girl carrying something too heavy. What happens if the debt gets stronger? I asked, her eyes lowered toward my ranch in the valley. Then your bloodline becomes tied to mine forever. Your children, their children, bound to protect mine until one line ends. That is why they fear me, not because I am witch, because I can claim your land, your name, your legacy. Just by existing. From below came the echo of hooves on stone. The riders had found the main trail. Torches burned bright near my barn. I could hear voices carrying on the wind. They think you've put some kind of spell on me, I muttered. No spell, she said softly. Only old law. Old debt. She shifted closer, still keeping her space, but enough that I could see her face clear in the moonlight. There is one way to break it, she said. How? I must save your life in return. Equal debt cancels both, or... She paused, her eyes fixed on mine. I must die, and the debt dies with me. The thought struck deep, sharper than I expected. Weeks of her presence, weeks of questions and silence, had built something in me I hadn't named. There has to be another way, I said. There is, but you will not like it. Before I could ask, a rifle cracked across the valley. Another shot followed. Muzzle flashes near my house, glass shattering, voices shouting. They're destroying my home, I said. They fear the binding, fear what it means for the whole town, Ayana answered. Then she straightened. I will go to them. Tell them I will leave and never return. No, the word came out harder than I meant. You're not responsible for their ignorance. I am responsible for the debt that brings trouble to you, she said, and started down the slope. Not running, not hiding, walking steady like someone who had already chosen her fate. 30 feet ahead of me now, leading instead of following. I matched her pace, keeping that strange distance. If you're going down there, I'm going with you. They will hurt you if they believe the binding is complete. Let them try, I said. She stopped suddenly and turned. For the third time that day, she broke her own rule. Stepping so close, I caught the scent of sage in her hair, felt her breath in the cool night air. Why you do this? She asked. Debt is not your choosing. I looked into those dark eyes and found the truth waiting. Maybe the debt isn't my choice, but caring what happens to you is. Another gunshot split the night. Wood splintered somewhere down at the barn. The crowd was growing restless, and that made them dangerous. We walked on side by side, but still apart. As we broke from the tree line, torches swung our way. The sight of us together drew a sharp stir. Rifles lifted. Henrik Larsson's voice boomed. That's far enough, Delaney. Send that witch away, or we'll send her for you. She's not a witch, I shouted back, stopping where they could see me plain. She's following her people's ways. Customs that curse this valley, Henrik barked. Our cattle sick, our wells drying up, ever since she started trailing you. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward with a torch, the flame throwing shadows across her face. Nothing's gone right since she came. Nothing. I looked around at neighbors I'd known for years, men I'd helped with harvest, folks who'd sat at my table, people who had once trusted me. Fear had twisted them into strangers. Fear had twisted neighbors into strangers, and strangers into something dangerous. The cattle got sick from Morrison's bad feed, I said, keeping my voice steady. The wells are low because we haven't had rain in 6 weeks. None of that has anything to do with Ayana. Then why won't she leave you alone? Henrik demanded. Why is she trailing you like a curse? I glanced back at her. She stood 30 feet behind, calm even with rifles pointed her way. She gave me the slightest nod, permission to speak. Her people believe they owe mine a debt, I said simply. An old debt going back to my grandfather. When you save a life, you become bound to it. She follows me because she thinks she owes my family protection. Protection from what? Mrs. Patterson asked, suspicion sharp in her voice. From making the same mistake twice, Ayana answered, her voice clear, carrying across the yard. Boon Delaney saved my life. Now I make sure he does not need saving. Henrik laughed, but the sound was cold. You expect us to believe she's following you to protect you? I pointed to the broken windows. The fence posts snapped, the splintered boards. Look around. Who needs protecting from who? For a moment silence held. In the torchlight, the damage they'd done was plain. Fear had driven them to destroy what they claimed to defend. She needs to go back to her people, Mrs. Patterson said finally. This debt business, it isn't natural. It isn't Christian. She's not hurting anyone, I said. She's hurting you, Henrik snapped. He stepped closer, rifle still leveled. Look at yourself, Boon. You're so twisted up you can't see straight. That's not natural either. Behind me, I felt Ayana tense. The 30 feet between us felt like an ocean. And then I heard my own voice, surprising even me. What if I don't want her to go? The words hung in the night air like smoke. Henrik's face hardened, anger darkening his eyes. Then you're choosing her over your own people. That makes you as dangerous as she is. The standoff stretched taut as a drawn bow. His finger hovered near the trigger. The men behind him shifted, uncertain. Then Ayana moved. For the 4th time since I'd known her, she crossed the distance, stepping until she stood just behind my shoulder. Wait, she said, and the authority in her voice stilled Henrik's hand. I tell you how to break debt. How to make me leave forever. Her presence was close enough now I could smell sage and leather, feel the warmth of her standing near. Delaney must save my life in return, she said. Equal debt cancels both. Then I am free to go back to my people, and he is free from obligation. Mrs. Patterson lowered her torch a little. Save your life? How? That is between him and me, Ayana replied, her voice firm. But it must be real danger. Real saving. Not pretend. Henrik's eyes narrowed. And how do we know you won't just come back? How do we know this isn't some trick? Because my father is Joseph Running Bear, medicine man of our clan. He will witness the debt breaking. Once it is done, no one in my family will claim Delaney blood or land. If we want this over as much as you. I turned, studying her face in the torchlight. What real danger? What are you planning? Her eyes met mine, steady as the river current itself. River where you found me, she said. Snowmelt makes the water strong. I go in. You pull me out. Debt is broken. That's not saving your life, I said. That's risking it. Risk must be real, Ayana answered, her voice calm but carrying a faint tremor. Or debt remains. Tomorrow, before the sun is high. Your people can watch, so they know the debt-breaking is true. The men muttered among themselves. Her words gave them what they craved. A clear test, an end to the unease that had been eating at them. What if something goes wrong? I asked. What if I can't reach you in time? Her lips curved just barely into the ghost of a smile. Then debt is broken a different way. But you will reach me. You are a good swimmer, Boon Delaney. Too good at saving people who were never meant to be saved. Henrik's rifle lowered at last. Tomorrow morning, he said, we'll be there to witness it. And when it's done, you go back to your people and never set foot in this valley again. When it's done, Ayana corrected, I am free to choose where I go. The debt will be broken. That does not mean I must vanish. The distinction slid past Henrik, but it struck me hard. She wasn't promising to leave forever, only that the chain between us would be cut. The crowd began to break apart, their anger spent now that an end had been promised. Ayana stepped back to her 30-foot distance, yet the rule felt thinner than before. The memory of her standing close enough to feel her breath, lingered like a warmth that distance couldn't cool. Will your father really come? I asked. At sunrise, she said. He wants this ended as much as anyone. He has watched 3 generations of our family bound to yours. He is tired of the obligation. Her eyes drifted to the river, moonlight dancing over the restless water. For a long time she was quiet. So long I thought she wouldn't answer at all. Then, in a voice soft as wind in tall grass, she added, After tomorrow, if I stay near you, it will not be because I must. It will be because I want to. Dawn came grey and cold, mist rising from the river like the ghosts of the night before. I stood on the bank, where I had first pulled her from the current, watching the snowmelt swell the water into something fierce and unforgiving. The spiral of stones she had laid weeks ago was still there, though half the rings were drowned beneath the rising flow. Joseph Running Bear arrived with the sun. He was tall, weathered by years outdoors, silver streaks in his black hair, his eyes sharp and knowing. A leather medicine bag hung at his side, and his clothing marked him clearly as Apache. Yet when he spoke, it was in measured English. You are Ezra Delaney's grandson, he said. I am, I answered. Your grandfather was a good man. Stubborn, he allowed, but good. His gaze lingered on my face, heavy with the same intensity I'd come to know in Ayana's. This debt has weighed too long on both our families. By 7 o'clock, the townsfolk had gathered along the banks. They kept their distance, but their presence pressed on me all the same. Henrik Larsson stood at the front, arms crossed, eyes locked on me like a man waiting for proof. The townsfolk lined the riverbank, skeptical but curious. Mrs. Patterson clutched her shawl against the chill, her face caught between concern and a hint of relief. Henrik stood with his arms crossed, eyes narrowed, as if waiting for me to fail. Ayana arrived last, walking with her measured pace down the path. But today she didn't stop 30 feet away. For the first time since I'd known her, she walked straight to where her father and I stood. The invisible barrier was gone. The current strong, I said, watching the white water surge past, stronger than the day I'd pulled her from it. It must be real danger, she answered, repeating the words she'd spoken the night before. If there is no risk, the balance is not restored, Joseph. Running Bear opened his leather bag and placed 4 eagle feathers on the ground in a pattern that mirrored the stone spiral beneath the river's surface. These represent 4 generations of debt, he said. Maria Santos, her daughter, my wife, her granddaughter, and Ayana. When debt is broken, feathers go into the river, carried away by the current. The symbolism was clear enough. The reality tied my stomach in knots. The river was treacherous today, fast, swollen, and merciless. There has to be another way, I tried again. Ayana shook her head. This way honors both traditions. Ours requires balance. Yours requires proof. This gives both. She stripped off her outer clothing, left in a simple dress that clung to her frame in the cold morning air. Her arms rose in goosebumps, but her face never faltered. When I go under, count to 10 before you follow, she said. It must look real, feel real, but do not wait longer than 10 counts. Joseph began speaking in Apache, words I couldn't understand but could feel in my chest like a drum. Ayana closed her eyes, listening. When she opened them, she fixed her gaze on me. After today, no more following. No more debt. No more obligation. Her voice softened. After today, we choose for ourselves what comes next. Then she turned and walked into the river. The current seized her at once, dragging her downstream toward the dark channel. She let it carry her, arms loose at her sides. I counted 1, 2, 3. Her head bobbed in the foam. 5. She slipped under. 8. Still no sign. I dove before I reached 10. The mountain water hit like a hammer, knocking the air from my lungs. The current dragged at my boots, clawed at my clothes, trying to sweep me into the same black pool. I fought hard, swimming toward where I'd last seen her. There, a flash of hair near the rocks. I reached her just as she broke the surface, choking on river water. This was no ritual now. Her eyes were wide with real fear. The current had turned the test into something deadly. I locked my arm around her chest and kicked for shore, lungs burning, every stroke a battle. Behind us, Joseph's voice rose sharp and commanding, words rolling like prayer over the roar of the water. On the bank, the townsfolk had stepped forward, their earlier suspicions stripped away, replaced by alarm as they watched the river fight to keep us. My feet finally struck stone. I hauled her up onto the grass. We collapsed together, gasping, soaked, shaking from the cold. She coughed until her breath steadied, her whole body trembling. Joseph knelt beside her, hands steady as he checked her, then lifted his eyes to me. Respect flickered there. Debt is balanced, he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. Equal saving for equal saving. The obligation is ended. He rose and cast the 4 feathers into the river. We all watched as they swirled in the foam, caught by the current, and carried downstream until they were gone. The feathers swirled downstream, carried by the same river that had nearly claimed us both in different seasons. Henrik Larsson was the first to break the silence. It's done then. She'll go back to her people. Joseph Running Bear's eyes rested on his daughter, who was sitting upright now, damp and breathing steady. She is free to choose. Debt no longer binds her to follow or to flee. Ayana rose slowly, water streaming from her hair and dress. She walked straight toward me, not 30 feet away this time, but close enough to touch. Close enough for me to see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. No more following, she said, her voice roughened by the river. The words should have brought relief. Instead, I felt a strange hollow in my chest. For weeks she had been there, Constant, silent, steady. And her presence had become part of my days in a way I hadn't noticed until the thought of losing it. "Where will you go?" I asked. She lifted a hand and touched my face, tracing the line of my jaw. The gesture was gentle, chosen, free. "I will build a house," she said, "on the hill above your ranch. Close enough to visit, far enough to be my own choice." "The townsfolk won't like that," I murmured. Her gaze flicked toward Henrik and Mrs. Patterson. Their faces were a mix of confusion and weary acceptance. "They will learn to live with what they cannot change." Then her eyes returned to mine. "And you, Boon Delaney, will you like that?" I thought of the past weeks, the mystery, the frustration, and the quiet bond that had taken root between us. The debt was gone. The obligation ended. But what remained was something no law, no tradition had accounted for. "I'd like that very much," I said. She smiled then, her first true smile since I'd known her. It lit her face like sunrise, warm and radiant. "Good," she said softly, "because now when I come to see you it will be because I want to, not because I must." She stepped closer still, close enough that her breath warmed my cheek. And that makes all the difference. 3 months later, her cabin stood on the hillside. From my kitchen window, I could see smoke curling from her chimney each morning and lamplight glowing each night. She came down when she pleased, not bound by distance or debt, but by choice. The following had ended. But what began in its place was better. 2 people choosing each other freely, on their own terms. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen to hear another unforgettable tale of the Old West, where fate and courage collide in ways you never expect. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep these stories alive. Your support means the world to us.